Bunking Taehun's scaling in the Lookism verse.
Oh great, another attempted debunk. Well, let's see if this one works.
Some people seem to think that Taehun is relative to Hansu.
Up to a certain point, yes.
While yes, that is true, is not what they actually expect. And in no way is it above the likes of Warren or Lil Daniel.
It's far greater than anything Warren or Little Daniel have performed up until this point, but let's see where you go with this.
Let me explain. The reason why they think that Taehun's scaling is so high is because of the father versus son fight, and that Hansu completely removed his limiter during that fight when in reality he actually didn't.
Yes, he did.
So we all know how Hansu limits himself using the personality patch, so he wouldn't lose control and go rampant.
Yeah, that's not the reason why the personality patch was instilled. The personality patch was instilled to keep Hansu from reverting back to his delinquent days, to that personality that he had when he was in his youth. It wasn't meant to keep him from going rampant. We know what that original personality was because we see it in the Manager Kim flashback. And even in that flashback, when Hansu is actually fighting a strong opponent, he is actually relatively calm and collected. However, he does use whatever is needed to actually beat said opponent, which is why he uses the 27-20, which, yes, is the 7-spin kick that PGJ talked about in a video at one point. So, yeah, that's not what the personality patch is for, which is also why Hansu doesn't look completely rage-filled when he removes it against Taehun. The situations are incredibly different, and we'll be getting into that later, because I know damn well this guy's going to bring that up.
But if you compare Hansu, who removes 66% of his limiter in the Manager Kim manhwa, and Hansu from the father and son fight, they are clearly different in personality.
And called it. The reason why their personalities are so different is because of the scenarios they're in. They're in completely different scenarios, which is why the personalities shift so much. In Manager Kim, he is involuntarily removing the personality patch due to a PTSD episode. He is remembering the trauma from his training when he is poisoned and electrocuted, which causes him to involuntarily remove it and lose his mind because he's having PTSD. Meanwhile, against Taehun, he's removing it because it is what is necessary to defeat Taehun. He's still going back to his original personality, but he's not having a PTSD flashback that's causing him to lose his mind. They are two entirely different scenarios, and we'll be talking more about the Taehun stuff in a little bit.
Hansu is even capable of killing in that state.
What, so Hansu is just now incapable of killing someone outside the personality patch? ITF, especially the ITF that Hansu teaches, is literally made to kill the opponent. So why is this a point?
And now compare this Hansu from Manager Kim and this Hansu from the father and son fight.
We already went over this, and I don't feel like repeating myself.
Hansu from Manager Kim was even stated to be hard to defeat even for Kim and Jin Cheol. He is even designated as a level 1 threat who has lost his temper and couldn't care about friend and foe.
I mean, honestly, this fight just makes Taehun's scaling even crazier, let's be honest. Also, I'm not really going to address the whole, oh, he doesn't care about friend and foe. We already went over why the personality patch is the way it is when Hansu is forced to remove it from PTSD, so there's no point.
Hansu is capable of killing and attacking his precious friends in this state. Why would he unleash that side towards his own son?
Hansu has openly shown no qualms with beating up Taehun. Hell, when he first started teaching Taehun ITF, he immediately kicked him in the kidney while Taehun was off guard. Hansu has no issue beating the crap out of Taehun, and in fact, he just uses whatever is necessary to beat Taehun, which is why he did what he did against Taehun when Taehun whipped out the strongest kick he has ever seen. But again, we'll get into the Taehun stuff later, but yeah, at this point, doesn't work.
Also, if he did remove the limiter, shouldn't it have shown?
It's almost like these are two completely different series with completely different ways of portraying their characters and amps.
Also, if you read closely, it is indicated that Hansu removes his limiter if he remembers that trauma from the past.
It is indicated that that is why the personality patch was involuntarily removed in that instance. However, it is in no way indicated that that is the exclusive requirement for the removal of the character patch. Again, completely different scenarios.
Where he was electrocuted or poisoned. And every time he removes his limiter, he was also electrocuted just like the first time, and poisoned just like the latest chapter in the father and sin fight. He was neither.
Yes, because trauma isn't the exclusive requirement.
Look at this comment here. Why would it upscale Taehun? Because you've already stated that Hansu completely removed his limiter during the father and son fight. So why would it upscale Taehun here in the latest chap?
Before these last couple of chapters, all we knew was that Hansu was around Manager Kim's level. We knew he was likely stronger due to the character patch's reveal. However, we didn't know how big of an amp the character patch really provided until recently. And now, Hansu is fighting against the strongest form of Jinchul Phase 1 War Mode while only at 34% of the patch. And it's actually referenced that Hansu is actually calming down a bit, meaning he's actually getting weaker and yet is still relative to the strongest version of Jinchul. If Taehun was able to push Hansu to completely remove the patch, then yeah, it's going to upscale Taehun tremendously from where we previously had him, above Manager Kim, actually.
Also, let's talk feats now. If Taehun is narratively above someone like Sinu or Lil Daniel,
You say feats, but then reference narrative. Make up your mind.
why he is unable to break free from this? And how did he not avoid this?
Throughout the entirety of 170, Taehun is essentially nerfed into oblivion due to Joshua's presence. He has to constantly worry about trying to work with Joshua, even though they are clearly not compatible, which handicaps both of them, which causes them both to lose to a far weaker opponent. And then this also comes into play in the group fight. Despite being in an incredibly disadvantageous scenario for a Taekwondo fighter, Taehun is able to easily defend himself and ward off his attackers, only losing that upper hand when he sees that they just keep fighting. Even though they get knocked down, they just keep springing back up because they're more scared of their boss than they are of dying facing him, and thus he gets grabbed and is completely shaken by this. He then sees Joshua get stabbed by someone thrusting a spear through his own comrade, which completely baffles Taehun. He's completely thrown off. He can't comprehend that people would do something like this, and it shakes him off his game, which leads to him almost being stabbed himself. In fact, we actually see in chapter 167, when he's not worried about synergizing with Joshua or being completely thrown off his game, he's able to easily deal with multiple opponents at once, even taking out numerous of them with a single attack, even though he's actively defending someone at the same time. If Taehun is in a situation where he's not nerfed all to hell, he's able to easily deal with multiple opponents. So this point, once again, doesn't work at all.
I mean, look at Sinu here. He is fighting more people and more people are grabbing him. And yet he was able to overpower them.
Wow, it's almost like different series have different ways of portraying strength. Also, if we're basing how powerful someone is off of how well they deal with multiple opponents, then Kim Soo-yeon from Questism is a god tier in the verse.
And look at Lil Daniel. Look at the space and distance he has here. His opponents are also completely bigger and more in numbers, yet he still managed to easily escape.
Good job leaving out the majority of that scene to back your narrative. It's actually directly shown that Daniel, if he is surrounded, is not going to deal too well with multiple opponents. And Gunn even states that if you let yourself get cornered, it's all over. They need to attack relentlessly and break the formation.
One more thing about Hansu's statement is that he said youth. So if you say that Taehun brought Hansu back to the past and remembered his training, keep in mind he said youth, meaning he brought Hansu to how he was when he was in his youth years.
Don't know what training he would be remembering, but yes, he's going back to the personality he had in his youth. That's kind of how the character patch works.
This makes even more sense because of how they are alike when Hansu is young. Even Manager Kim has stated that Warren made him remember his youth.
When SMK is fighting Warren, he states it's like he's seeing his younger self. He isn't returning to his youth years. He isn't returning to that personality that he had like Hansu is, and he certainly isn't growing stronger. He's just seeing someone who reminds him of his younger days. That's all this is. It's not him getting stronger. It's not fully bringing him back to his youth. I really don't know why you tried to make this point. It doesn't work.
Although that was before the Manager Kim manhwa, the moment the manhwa released, it completely changed the perspective of this fight. So with all that said, Taehun's scaling is now debunked.
No, it isn't. This debunk failed miserably. Also, when you're going to debunk Jin Young, Gapper, and Kim, I really hope you make it better, because I am interested to see what you have to say for that. But for the time being, let's get into more of Taehun's scaling and really delve into just how strong he is. The first thing we're going to talk about with Taehun scaling is a fight that takes place in chapter 171 that isn't really talked about much, that being Taehun's fight with Yeoncheol Ma, which just so happens to take place right before his fight with Hansu. This fight is one that gives Taehun a bit of trouble simply due to just how durable Gyuncho really is. He's able to effortlessly tank a 1440 and even tank a back kick to the solar plexus, one of the weak points of the body, with once again no issue whatsoever. This shows just how durable Gyuncho is and is very, very important for later. After witnessing Gyunchol's durability, Taehun takes a bicycle chain from Joshua and wraps it around his foot, which quite literally gives his kicks an extra edge, allowing him to effortlessly cut through the flesh of Gyunchol and then very easily one-shot him. Keep in mind, Gyunchol was previously taking a back kick to the solar plexus and a 1440, yet this kick after Taehun gets the bicycle chain is able to easily one-shot him. Now, even if you wanted to say that these chains do not grant Taehun an AP boost, they still do enhance his kicks as they allow him to cut through his opponents. Now, what is he missing when he goes to fight Hansu? That's right, the chains. Even though these chains grant Taehun a massive advantage, he removes them before going in to fight Hansu. Speaking of the fight with Hansu, I think it's about time we start delving into that. Now, as I'm sure all of you are aware, throughout the vast majority of this fight, Hansu is very clearly holding back. He puts himself at a disadvantage and exclusively utilizes his left leg. However, there is one detail that I'm sure most, if not all of you, missed, and that was the fact that not only was Hansu holding back, but Taehun was holding back as well. After Taehun calls Hansu out for holding back, Hansu fires back by saying that Taehun is dragging this out and that needs to give it everything he has, essentially saying that Taehun himself is also holding back, which Taehun reaffirms that he's just being considerate. And this is stated in both the webtoon and void scans. He then says he's done playing around, that he's going to give it his all, and fires a back kick at Hansu, which Hansu catches. Hansu then directly implies that Taehun still isn't going all out, which leads to Hansu questioning if this is actually all Taehun has to offer. He's wondering if Taehun can do more or if this is really the extent of his ability. Hansu then begins to lecture Taehun on Taehun's perceived lack of balance, stating that Taehun has essentially forsaken WT-style Taekwondo in favor of the perceived superior style, that being ITF-style Taekwondo, explaining that in order to have balance, you need to meld these two styles together. You can't just focus on the real-world practicality of ITF and disregard all the advantages that WT-style has. If you do that, you will lack balance, and he doesn't think Taehun has this. But of course, Taehun very quickly proves him wrong. After Hansu finishes this lecture, he goes for a kick that is intended to finish off Taehun. However, when this kick is about to reach Taehun's face, keep in mind Taehun is not in an optimal position to respond. Taehun's foot suddenly appears directly in front of Hansu's face, and Taehun nearly blitzes him. In fact, based on what we're seeing, the only reason Taehun didn't blitz him is because of the stance he was in. It was not an optimal stance to throw a kick like this, yet Taehun still fixed the stance and threw a massive side kick directly at Hansu's face, which Hansu barely manages to dodge. After this scene, Hansu puts 2 and 2 together, realizing that he combined WT-style Taekwondo and ITF-style Taekwondo with this continued kick, combining all of the over 3,000 differences in their techniques together. After this, Taehun goes on the offensive, and Hansu remarks that Taehun is making fun of him, and that he's had balance from the start. Keep in mind, Taehun still has yet to go all out. He's showing Hansu that he has had balance, that what Hansu said was wrong, but he still isn't giving it his all, which we can tell based on how Taehun is acting. He's directly poking fun at Hansu, and Hansu realizes this. After this, Hansu remarks that this is exactly what he was looking for, that now he can call Taehun his son, stating that Taehun can really fight now, which is what Taehun has been looking for since the start. And it's now we finally explain why Taehun is holding back. This whole time, up until this point, Taehun's goal was not to beat Hansu. It was to get the respect from his father, to show his father that he was wrong, to show him that he's worthy of the praise. And once Hansu delivers said praise and starts taking Taehun seriously, Hansu, by the way, is going serious now, Taehun can finally give it his all, which is what we see happen next. Also, when Hansu hits him with this full force back kick, Taehun tanks it with really no problem. The next sequence is one that I'm sure you are all familiar with. As Taehun runs at Hansu, he sends himself skyrocketing into the air as Hansu asks how he's jumping that high. And as Taehun begins to spin, he asks another question. Just how many times did you just spin? As Taehun remarks that he's found something that he's really good at, and the name of the technique is revealed, the house belt spinning kick, a combination of two techniques, a corkscrew and a roundhouse, to create the ultimate spinning kick, which then leads to Hansu meeting it with something even stronger. Now, before we get into the technique itself, we really do need to delve into the two different translations found in Void Scans and Webtoon and really look at how awful the Webtoon translation is. Because everybody seems to, for some reason, collectively agree that Webtoon is the only official translation, which is just blatantly wrong, seeing as they do get things wrong, and they do get them wrong quite often. Need I remind you of when they said that Nam's CQC range was only 1 foot? Yeah, Webtoon gets things wrong. They aren't flawless, and this scene is another example of that. In Void Scans, Hansu states he's going back to his puberty. Meanwhile, Webtoon, they state, you're keeping me on my toes. Now, even if you just use the most basic translation site, you will get something entirely different, and it will say, going back to my prime. I even got someone to translate, and what we get is essentially Taehun bringing back Hansu's prime in this instance, meaning the period that they were at their best, typically in terms of physical ability, skills, and performance. And we even get the other part, which is bring out the best in me, and he's stating that Taehun has the capability to bring out the best in him, his prime physical ability, which would mean when he's at his best, which would have to be full character patch removed. So no matter what, if you go with the full Korean translation that we just got, or the Void Scans, it's going to mean the character patch, and the Webtoon one is just blatantly wrong. I have no idea how Webtoon got "you're keeping me on my toes" from that. It makes no sense. Even the most basic translation site will tell you prime. So yeah, no matter which way you slice it, Hansu removed the full character patch in this scene. When Hansu makes this statement, he's in a very interesting stance. He's very low to the ground and shelled up, almost like a turtle within its shell, before exploding down with one of the most powerful kicks we have ever seen in the PGJ universe. And we find out the name of this kick is the extended kick Hyunmoo, which for those that don't know, Hyunmoo is one of the 4 guardian deities of Korea and also looks to be Hansu's spirit animal, which is insane in its own right. But this kick is enough to immediately knock out Taehun. Now, the debunk that people try to use is that because it didn't kill Taehun, Hansu had to be holding back. And to that I ask, why? We know Taehun has some absolutely insane durability, even when he was weaker back in the day, when he was fighting Manjul, Seonjun, people like that. He's able to take liver kicks, kidney kicks, slams from Seonjun when he was massively weaker. Now he's reached this insane level. Why wouldn't he be able to survive this kick? It does immediately knock him out, but he's gonna survive, obviously, due to that durability that he has. It's not far out of the realms of imagination at this point. So that debunk really makes no sense whatsoever. It's never that, oh, the character is strong, it has to be that the other one is weaker or holding back you, Sun and Johan. However, that's besides the point. So now, with all that established, we know that going into this fight with Hansu, Taehun was fatigued, removed a massive amp that he had that would have given him a major advantage against Hansu, and was constantly holding back in this fight. And then the second he did give it his all, Hansu completely removed his character patch and hit Taehun with one of the strongest kicks we've ever seen in the series. Oh, and also another thing. Thanks to Chapter 192 of Viral Hit, we know that Taehun still has access to that weird bloodlusted state that he had back when Do-eun died, though this time it seems to be even more terrifying. I didn't know that was possible, but it is. So what we can gather from this is that even though Taehun was fighting against Hansu and seemed to go all out, we still have yet to see the strongest version of Taehun. He didn't use his best state against Hansu. Yes, it's like because he didn't have access to it, but regardless, we still haven't seen the strongest form of Taehun in action. And yes, we can't say how strong this form is. It's an unquantifiable amp, so we can't really count it. It's just something that I feel like we should take note of, and I'm calling it, we're going to see this state very soon. With all that out of the way, I hope it makes sense now why I have Taehun so high up on my tier list. And before someone says it, no, none of this puts him above Jin Cheol. Even though Jin Cheol was relative to a 66% Hansu, he should still be able to do better than Taehun did against, full power Hansu. Taehun got one-shotted. I don't think Jin Cheol is going to get one-shot. I think Jin Cheol is going to actually be able to put up a fight. However, Taehun should be in that same generalized power dynamic. So that's why I have Taehun where he is. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one.